Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rusted Dave Daverson, and I'm here to talk about you a pill that will make your brain stronger than ever. I'm talking about nootropics. I'm talking about Gorilla Mind. I'm talking about something that will make you feel like the entire world is yours for the taking. I'm talking about not only the red pill, but the crimson pill. This pill is so red you can't even be seen unless you're wearing those eclipse glasses. I'm talking about the pill that will change the world. Any man is yours to conquer. Any woman, doesn't matter. Not people. Any child, children are useless. This pill is going to make you the most powerful man in the universe. This pill is going to make you see right through all the conspiracy. You're going to see every single banker as you walk by. You're going to know they're sneaky little tendrils taking all the money from you, and they're going to know exactly about the homosexual agenda. This is a pill for you. It will make you stronger. It will make you more virile. You will be having children left and right. You will feel like you have never felt before, and I promise you that. This pill is $49.98, and that is a lot less than the globalists want me to make you pay for it. But I promise you, I'm selling this pill at cost. I'm selling this crimson pill at cost, and it is going to make you feel so good. You are not even going to want to do anything else. You're just going to sit at home, browsing InfoWars, with one hand on the mouse and the other hand holding this pill, thanking it for what it has done for you and your energy. Down with globalism, up with crimson pill. Thank you.
Anyone have any thoughts on that? Oh my god!
That's...
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Trending Left, a progressive political podcast hosted by four of us friends here at the University of Texas at Austin. My name is Andrew Herrera.
My name is Marco Harvey.
I'm Samuel Birdsall. Nicholas Cobb.
We're so happy that you guys are listening to our very first episode. We thought we would just kind of talk a little bit about ourselves first, just give you guys a little bit of background on who we are, and then, get into some of the comedic relief and everything like that. We're
Plenty of that's going to happen.
Hopefully going to get in between all the news stories we want to cover for you guys. So, do you want to go first, Nate?
As I already said, my name is Nicholas Cobb. I am a senior here at UT. I am a computer science major, and some of the political issues that I'm passionate about are voting issues and drug policy.
Alright, I'm Marco Harvey, mentioned that. I'm a sophomore here at UT, business major, and some of the issues I'm passionate about personally are climate change and just general women's rights.
Also, he's from Laredo.
I'm from Laredo.
I'm Samuel Birdsall. I'm a senior history major at UT. I am most passionate about the minimum wage because it is an absolute travesty that, it's an absolute travesty that people who are working two full-time jobs on a minimum wage won't be able to pay for the average apartment in all 50 states. So we really need to make America,
Great again, please.
pretty much. Actually great again.
Yeah, and like I said, my name is Andrew Herrera. I'm a sophomore government major here at UT. I've done a lot of activism, since I've started here, and I've worked with the Ledge and with some political campaigns. And the stuff I'm really passionate about is pushing for single-payer health care, a higher minimum wage, and, reforming the criminal justice system as well as just immigration in general. So we really love that you guys have been so supportive of the podcast so far. I know we've really appreciated the 130 likes we have on Facebook and everything like that. Please
share with your friends.
Yeah, please make sure to share with everyone you know, regardless of whether they're progressive or conservative or whatever. 7 out of the 16 guests we'll have this semester are going to be from different ideologies other than Democrat. So we really want to make sure that we're interviewing people and getting everyone engaged in discussion.
And we definitely spend a lot of time arguing about that ratio.
Definitely. So the first news story we want to talk to you guys about is recently Trump announced that he was going to be pardoning Sheriff Joe Arpaio. If you guys don't know who he is, he's pretty much a human rights violator. I mean, that's the only way to put it. He basically had concentration camps at his prison, tent city, as Nick refers to it.
He literally kept his prisoners out in 120-degree heat and only gave them 2 meals a day and whatnot. So he was definitely abusing these prisoners. Not a good man.
I was listening to a podcast that was kind of talking about more of this, and in there they mentioned some things that you really wouldn't hear in the news, like he would have, in these prisons, he would have these televisions playing the Food Network and other networks that would tantalize these prisoners that are just eating nothing but slop, or if anything at all. Like I think you may have starved some of these guys, and he'd be playing like these tantalizing networks to kind of like show them like, oh, this is the world you're missing because he's such a horrible person. So it's just this guy. He takes no umbrage by being compared to the KKK. He happily calls his prisons concentration camps. Like this guy is, in every sense of the word, like a true and total deplorable.
Found guilty of discriminating against Latinos.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and also, on top of that, recently Sheriff David Clark, just resigned a couple days ago.
Yeah.
From his post in Milwaukee County, but now Politico's reporting that he's possibly going to be in the Trump administration, and it's like, between Trump's courting of both supporters of Arpaio and now, supporters of Clark kind of like hinting at this, and I'm sure someone in the White House is dropping these hints to the press. It's a disgusting, continuation of just the trends we've seen of them saying, oh, we're not white supremacists, we don't give in to these tendencies, we're not, racist, but continuously cultivating supporters from those areas,
Yeah.
Cool. So I think that's a pretty nice segue into talking a little bit about immigration, what's going on there, considering both of those people have had pretty staunch anti-immigration views. Here in Texas, SB4, which if you guys don't know what that is a show me your papers law, essentially. It's an anti-sanctuary cities bill that recently passed the Texas legislature. A federal court, circuit court, just blocked it, which is amazing news for dreamers and everyone who would be affected by it. But it's also kind of overshadowed by the looming threat that Trump's been postponing the last week. Saying he was going to do it on Friday and then Tuesday, and now it's kind of up in the air about repealing DACA. So what are your thoughts on that, guy?
Right. So I do want to just touch on SB4 just for a little bit. And I'm not going to say anything that hasn't been already said for the past months and months and months, but this Show Me Your Papers law is one of the more disgusting pieces of legislation that any of us have really had the not privilege of setting our ears on.
Very discriminatory.
Yeah, this is literally discriminatory politics, and it's just such a discriminatory law. This is a law that says that police officers can inquire about your citizenship, but they would have no reason to inquire about your citizenship if they already didn't have racially motivated reasons for doing so. And that's because you look brown, you don't look white enough, you're too black, you don't look like the typical white American who. They are all citizens, of course. We would never have any reason to question a white American, their white American citizenship. So this is the kind of thing that just propagates further and further discrimination of Latinos and possibly other minorities that we don't maybe we don't hear enough about. So this is just the kind of law that, honest to God, just disgusts me to no end, and I have so much shame living in a state where our legislators, not my personal legislators, but other people's legislators and just the legislative crop in general, just they have very little care in the world about understanding what immigrant families go through and what Latino families go through, in all parts of the state.
The most recent historical parallel would probably be pre-Civil War, when free African Americans had to show their papers to prove they were free or get sent to slavery. That's obviously not as drastic what we're dealing with here, but it's still absolutely god-awful and absolutely reprehensible.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of activism going on around campus, and I was, part of Sanctuary UT, which, is a group on campus that's for Sanctuary Campus initiatives and stuff like that last semester. I know recently there was just a protest that was happening, in coordinates with Labor Day and all of that stuff, kind of, that some groups were doing, and, a student was arrested and things like that. And I know that, people are still, even though it's been blocked by the courts here, SB4 in Texas, people are still kind of galvanizing around that activism and that support for the immigrant community. I think it's really important that we don't forget that just because this racist legislation either, at the state level or these initiatives don't get, pushed through. I know Paul Ryan's trying to lobby against it, half-heartedly right now.
Oh God! Can we just have a brief moment talk about Paul Ryan? Talk about the most spineless congressperson in the entire Congress. I just wanted to say that right away. Paul Ryan and his ilk have no shame when it comes to the kind of legislation that their state parties pass or that President Trump is advocating for.
Well, absolutely, and like I was going to say, it's they push to not do this because it looks politically bad. The optics are bad, but they don't want to push forward towards real immigration reform because whether it's they're a very far conservative congressman and there's racist undertones there, or it's just like it's a classist thing and they think that these people are poor, they're not worth spending their time on, they're not frankly part of their donor base that keeps them in elections, and they're not part of their constituencies in places like Wisconsin or whatever. It's just it's sad and it's sickening and it's disrespectful.
Yeah, agree. Any other thoughts from anyone?
All right.
All right.
So let's move on. As many of you guys know, obviously Hurricane Harvey, the whole relief effort is still going on. Something that I personally want to talk about was people kind of forgetting everybody think about the coastal areas a lot. A lot of people are, donating, celebrities are donating millions of dollars to Houston. That's fantastic. I know my girlfriend is there right now, and
Mine
at
too.
school and stuff, Sam's girlfriend is, and we have a lot of family and friends that are there. Like my brother the other day was interviewed by a local news channel. He was like canoeing through his neighborhood, helping people out because it's so badly flooded there. But you have entire areas in like Rockport and near Corpus Christi that are like completely devastated because that's where Harvey hit when it was Category 4.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're not getting any news representation, or like everyone nationally is just talking about Houston. Like, do you guys feel like that too? Like,
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I completely agree. Like, those towns and cities were more like, 5,000 people, and they're like ignoring that in lieu of, 6.5 million people, which in terms of numbers is understandable, but you really have to take into account the whole picture here. And it's not just Houston, it's all of South Texas. Like, it's a disaster of biblical proportions.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought when Harvey first made landfall, like the stories I would hear about were more on the lines of like Corpus Christi getting totally just bombarded with awful rains and flooding. But ever since it started hitting Houston, and trust me, I have no problems with Houston getting covered because it's such a large city. It's the 4th largest city in the U.S. after all. But we stopped hearing about Corpus Christi immediately after Harvey made landfall in the Houston area. So I mean, it's just important to remember that like there are 6 million people living in Houston, and they're all worthy of getting relief and the help that they need. But at the same time, like, there are literal like other suburbs and other areas close to the area or closer to Corpus Christi that have just been wiped off the map by the storm.
Yeah, like this is the most costliest hurricane history. It's
Yeah.
like worse than Katrina
And Sandy combined.
Yeah, and
I
Sandy
think.
combined. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
is it in history? Really?
Yeah,
I believe
it-
so.
it-
Yeah,
it-
US
at least in
history.
the U.S. history, it is
Yeah,
the
in U.S. history, my
yeah. It isn't the largest hurricane in history. It isn't even.
well, the costliest.
It isn't even like technically the most destructive hurricane, or even like the hurricane with the most fatalities. Thank goodness.
I mean, does that count like flood damage and all that? 'Cause I'm
Yeah,
sure,
well,
those
here's
numbers-
the
I'm sure
thing.
those numbers are still rising.
Well, yeah, here's the thing, right? Like it is the storm in U.S. history with the highest rainfall, and it beat the others. It beat the second largest storm. I think it had beaten it by about 5 or 6 inches of rainfall so far. I'm not sure if that number is still rising or not.
Probably not. I think the hurricane's dissipated by this point.
Yeah. I think it may adopt the moniker, your quote unquote superstorm moniker, which I'm not sure is like a real NOAA or like meteorological moniker. But at the same time, like this is a storm that is the textbook case of your climate change exacerbated
Yeah,
storm.
we're seeing people talk about that.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, other people.
And there's other areas of the world that are actually dealing with
Yes.
record level flooding too, like
In India.
Yeah.
Indonesia, I believe as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Like a third of their country is underwater. It's
Yeah.
mind blowing. Like, and we're also like in
Because
terms of
it's-
climate change, like it's not just storms. Like we're having the worst, like some of the worst droughts in world history too. For example, in the Middle
Absolutely,
East,
yeah.
that's a lot of what's driving, the violence down there. People don't have the food.
Well, absolutely, and that's why I totally agree with Obama in saying that I think it's climate change, and the effects that it has. Like you're talking about droughts, famines, all that stuff, pestilence, and it's entirely a national security threat. Like,
Absolutely.
people destabilize entire regions when there's not food.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, like just just another note on climate change in general. It absolutely astounds me. Like maybe you guys have the same feeling, but I am absolutely floored in a negative way when you see people, and I don't want to say conservatives because there are a lot of conservatives that believe in climate change. When climate change denying conservatives like Republicans, like our administration, when they go down to these areas and they speak to the people and they say all the uplifting things, but I know that like I get this horrible feeling that they just are refusing to acknowledge the fact that what they're doing are making these storms worse. And they keep acting as if there's nothing wrong in the world. Like this is just a particularly bad storm, and like that's not to say, you know, in all of this, we're not saying that there weren't bad storms before we started noticing the effects of climate change. Like that's not true. There have been plenty of bad storms, but climate change makes the storms more powerful and it makes them more common. So we know for a fact that like the waters of the Gulf of Mexico are significantly hotter than they were even just a couple of years ago. Yeah. And that literally brought about 30% more rain than otherwise would have been hit. So, you know, just like my final note here, like it is absolutely disgusting that our Republican administration, they go out to these areas and they feed people these stories of like, oh, it's going to get better and things are going to be, you know, things are going to improve, when in actuality, like, they're not going to improve. Like, right. we can flood the area, not horrible pun intended. We can bake the area with disaster relief funds and FEMA action, but it's not going to stop the fact that like the next storm is going to be more powerful than Harvey. They're going to be storms hitting all over the place in areas we wouldn't have even thought of before.
To follow through on this point, I know we're going in fairly in depth on it, but I think they already know the consequences of what they're doing, but they're catering to, you know, the rich elite who are all about, you know, their quarterly earnings, all their stock they're holding.
It's entirely a profit motive behind every decision. Yes.
And when I hear you know, climate change is a hoax perpetrated by China, it's like, take a look at the pollution they're dealing with. Like, they have to wear like breathing masks in Beijing. Sometimes they can't even go outside. Yeah. Like, they're taking measures, you know, like they are producing exponential growth and renewable energy.
You know, and a lot of that is why China and, you know, India especially are like, you know, they're heavily polluted because of a lot of industrial manufacturing, but they're also pushing heavily towards, you know, energy reform because they realize that if they do that now, they're going to be miles ahead of us in about, you know, 20, 30 years.
So if we want to make America great for the future, we have to do renewable energy on the level they are.
Oh yeah.
All right. So we're going to transition just a little bit so we can make sure we hit all the topics we want to get to for you guys. Recently, we had a Kasich Hickenlooper ticket that was kind of floated around.
Unity ticket.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this before, and we kind of all have, you know, very, very negative opinions.
Basically,
it's a resounding no. So, Nick, do you want to go first?
I mean, I feel like this is just a political stunt, you know, to try to make.
Okay, we need to clarify what we're talking about.
Right. Okay. for the listeners.
Those of you who don't know, Kasich Hickenlooper is not a law firm. It's it's John Kasich who ran
with the Justice Corporate.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
who ran in the Republican primary against Donald Trump, current governor of Ohio, and John Hickenlooper is the governor of Colorado. Pretty much like a standard Republican and like a
typical Democrat,
like a more moderate Democrat. Yeah. And kind of just ends up with some disgusting hybridization of basically what we see in every neoliberal politician today. Yeah. So I mean.
Right. So like that was a report that came out earlier this week that like they were considering a run at it, and it would be like the quote unquote unity ticket. Not that I want to sour the name or the words unity ticket, because like, you know, the unity ticket saved the country back in the 1860s, right? You know, Lincoln and Andrew Johnson. But like,
I don't know if I would have brought
Johnson. I'm not saying Andrew Johnson's like a good person. I'm just saying that, like, you know, that's how they won re-election. But like, just getting back to this, like we hear a lot about like how we're so polarized, and I agree. Like we're all in our separate camps, and like we're just kind of like, you know, Democrats vote Democrat, Republicans vote Republican, and we're finding it hard to like find compromise and things like that. And compromise can be a very good thing, but at the same time, we cannot like stand down from our morals and our values so quickly in order to achieve the feeling, the essence of a compromise, even though like this kind of compromise wouldn't really do a lot of good for the country. Even though like both of these guys have quote unquote moderate like auras, Kasich is a fundamentally pretty conservative guy, and I don't know much about Hickenlooper. Sorry, I don't know much about Hickenlooper's like tenure in Colorado, but I don't imagine he has a whole heck of a lot to agree with John Kasich. So what would this even accomplish? Like, this is the kind of thing.
It's just a feel-good thing.
It's just a feel-good thing. Like, this is the kind of thing that like it's so nice. Like, if you're just a very boring centrist that doesn't have the conviction to pick a side. This is the kind of thing that sounds really good until you actually think about messaging. You think about a platform. Like, what platform are these guys going to run? because
Well, they're gonna run on a platform of gradualism, which the American people just don't want. I mean, frankly, like I've talked to you guys about this, like the whole 30 years cyclical. You know, every 30 years, the American people get riled up because they haven't had higher wages. You know, we've seen wages stagnate since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a loss of innovation and a loss of a lot of industries that are just dying off, and we're not having the job creation and the job growth and the education programs for these people to get back into the workforce. And so we just see people be willing to go along with radical changes, like someone like Donald Trump, who's going to come in and shake things up, and they don't want more of the same old, centrist, like we're going to take it one step at a time every 10 years for you and try and eventually get you something that's going to work. People
Right.
want real change as soon as possible, and they want real change.
Right. I mean,
And if I can go real
yeah,
quick.
go ahead.
So, like, I'm all for bridging the gap, but when we can't agree on facts in the first place, there's
Yeah.
no chance of any bridge being, crossed. There is no. So this goes back to the revoking of the fairness doctrine under the Reagan era, I believe, and that made it so that the media essentially didn't have to present things objectively and fairly, and the second problem is, the rise of the internet, and that's obviously fantastic for people like us. It's the world we grew up in, but at the same
Follow us on
time,
Facebook.
yeah. But at the same time, like, it really leads to living in your own bubble,
Yeah.
and that when you can't agree on the facts and you're staying in your own bubble, there is not the slightest chance that any sort of moderate ideology, which I'm not in favor of anyways, but there's no chance that that's going to be popular.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is something to be said about like compromise and even gradualism to an extent. However, like at the same time, there is something to be said about radical, impactful, powerful change, right? Like, you think Roosevelt in like the 1930s was elected,
New Deal.
and like he said, oh, we're gonna gradually move our way to a social security system. We're gonna gradually move our way to like the Civilian Conservation Corps. Like, no, he was a pragmatic president, but like he got like things done because he had such a powerful mandate. And like, not that our voters have given Trump such a massive mandate, because really, like, he lost the popular vote by 2.8 million votes. But like, this is the kind of thing.
Segue into
Yeah,
that
no,
anyways.
sure.
Yeah. So if people were going to vote illegally, why the hell would they do that in California? There is no point.
Because that's where all the Mexicans are, Sam.
But wait, Sam, don't you know that if you just eliminate the votes in California and New York, Trump won the popular vote? All you have to do is disenfranchise a fifth of the country, and
cares
Trump
about
won the popular
California?
vote.
Okay, we're getting a little off topic, but I mean, like,
Hey, come on, Andrew. You
I
can
think
lasso
it's-
lasso us back to
I think
topic
it's
later.
relevant.
Okay, we're
I
having
think
fun here.
it's relevant. Anyways.
Yeah. So, like, just final thoughts on Unity Ticket. This is kind of not a very good. Like, it's a bad publicity stunt. It is pretty clear that I'm not even sure that Kasich was even
It's
in
a
on this
moot
either,
point,
because
Yeah,
like
didn't Kasich
No,
himself
neither
say
one of them
that?
was okay
Yeah.
with it. So.
Kasich was
Who
like,
came up with this?
no, this is not gonna happen. And I don't think they would have much electoral success if they tried this.
well, no, I mean, no. They're not even galvanizing figures by themselves. Like,
No, I mean Kasich is like
Kasich only stayed in the primary as long as he did because he was stubborn enough to not get out.
Kasich was literally the only other alternative to freaking Donald Trump, and he still lost. So like, he is not like.
I mean,
a
he did
galvanizing
go
figure.
through like 2/3 of the primaries already before that and got like last place in most of them.
I know. Like, the only state he won was Ohio, and like that's not a winning coalition to win the nomination, much less the presidency. So I mean, I hadn't even heard of Hickenlooper until this happened. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
who is Hickenlooper?
Alright, so the next story we kind of want to talk about, just really briefly, hundreds of New Yorkers rallied at the NFL headquarters in support of Colin Kaepernick. We just want to definitely give a shout out to all the people who went out to that and support them in what they were fighting for, because I mean it's a travesty that someone like Colin Kaepernick, who's obviously expressing their First Amendment right, is kind of standing up for the treatment of Black Americans in America through what's really just an innocent gesture that has a really impactful statement behind it, and it's kind of been co-opted by conservative pundits as just this completely disrespectful black man not knowing his place sort of mentality.
Yeah, and this has always been an issue for black people. It seems that we're always told, oh, if someone, does something violent, protest peacefully. All right, well, you have someone like Colin Kaepernick protesting peacefully, yet we're still getting whined at. I don't think it's because they don't like, the way we're protesting. I think they're mad.
You don't like that you're protesting.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. They're just being racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minorities just can't get it good, and neither can liberals apparently. I mean, look, like this is just the weekly explainer on what freedom of speech means from your good friends at Trending Left. Freedom of speech to protest your country does not mean you hate your country. It means that you have the foresight and the hindsight to be critical of your country, their past actions, and their possible future actions.
That is patriotism.
Yeah, it's literally patriotism.
That's
Freedom
one
is
of the things that makes America great, being
Yeah.
able to actually do that.
Yeah.
That's something we should be proud of, not deplore.
Freedom of speech is being able to protest a repulsive figure coming onto your campus. It's not inhibiting that repulsive figure's freedom of speech because it's up to the campus to decide, or the people hosting them to decide whether they're going to host them or not, right? So this has just been a weekly explainer because we have to explain it every single time a neo-Nazi wants to come onto a campus, and some people are like, oh, maybe that shouldn't be happening, and then conservatives get all up in arms. So I don't mean to just stray this away from what we're talking about here with Kaepernick, but all of this ties into the free speech issue, which isn't really an issue, but where you have the far right, just complaining about the fact that liberals and the left, or even the center left, are just saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have neo-Nazis, or maybe Kaepernick should just be allowed to speak his mind. People, you're not forced to agree with Kaepernick or with anyone that's protesting. You're not. That's not what it is. In fact, it's your right to disagree with what he does.
Mm-hmm.
But to say that he is hating his country, or that he should just leave if he hates this country so much, I mean, that is just the smallest. What kind of small level thinking are some of these people on at times? It's so disheartening that freedom of speech and the idea of freedom of speech has been so clouded in our modern discourse.
It's also really striking to me just how okay the right-wing media seems to be with, neo-Nazis out in the streets. The same sort of thing was actually happening, pre-World War II. There were Nazi rallies in, say, New York City. And obviously we know the outcome of that, but, it's not as one-sided as... History isn't as one-sided as it's often, leading people to believe.
I think when you're talking about, especially when you're talking about Breitbart and groups like that, the Alex Jones types, those are a little bit. Those are super male vitality. those are a little bit different takes on that issue. I think groups
even Fox.
I think groups like Fox News are actually a little less tolerant of the white supremacists, and I think they're unwilling to think that their own supporters could be anywhere near those people, and so they just outright deny it. So I think it's a little bit different of a take on the issue, but I think it's still the same root of just denying the fact that, hey, why are these people voting for you in the first place? Why are these people supporting candidates that you like?
Yeah.
Why are they watching your news? Why are they endorsing you? So it's a little bit different take, I think, and we need to be careful of that. That way we can assess with each media source what is the exact problem that they need to be looking at, and when they're looking in the mirror.
Yeah, I mean, you can do all the mental gymnastics you want if to say that Donald Trump isn't racist, even though we all agree that he is.
Yeah.
You can do all that, but you still can't deny the fact that he is supported by all the racists.
Of course.
So next news story, we wanted to talk a little bit about more North Korea stuff heating up. North Korea recently fired. I know Marco doesn't like foreign policy.
See, don't misconstrue me, Andrew, because that's just such a place of privilege, right? He doesn't like foreign policy. He doesn't care what's going on in the world. It's not that. It's not I'm just less well versed in it.
Well, we'll help educate you.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so...
Sorry, I'll keep my mouth shut.
North Korea recently fired a missile over Japan, which Sam was just telling us a little bit about it a little bit ago.
Yeah, so the reason it's important that it went over Japan is that previously North Korea had been taking rocket trajectories that kept it away from Japanese water. They didn't want to, really anger any of their close countries like, South Korea or Japan or China or anything. But now they don't care anymore. Now they're willing to make very aggressive posturing moves like that, and it indicates that they're more and more willing to use force and call any bluff that we may put out, which in the age of Trump, it means there's a big ton of bluffs. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is so interesting because in the past, this is the kind of thing. North Korea is really a China puppet state. It's kind of it's a Chinese satellite state, and this is the kind of thing where a couple years ago I would have said China will not allow themselves to go to war with the United States
Well,
and their
they've-
allies over North Korea.
it's
But
not really a
now,
puppet
but now,
state.
but well, no, not a puppet state.
Well,
but
now
more
they're-
like a satellite
Well, now
state.
they're making moves to decrease coal exports and imports from to North Korea, and now we're seeing.
Right.
I mean, my philosophy on the thing is, I see the Chinese government is very focused on just the business interests, which I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
much any government, but I think China,
But
especially
China in particular.
with its manufacturing strength and recent growth.
Right.
And so I think what they're really focused on is this bad for business? You know, for us to be associated with people who are putting people in concentration camps and starving them, and
But I'm also-
and I think now they're reaching the point where it's just like it's just too bad for them, which is an ethical dilemma.
No, a large
in
part of
itself.
why they haven't done anything yet is because they're so worried about a potential flood of refugees.
Oh
into
yeah, and
North
I've heard
Korea.
about that as well. And they're worried about a united Korean peninsula, the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah,
should be involved in
they
that.
want to have a buffer state. Like
Absolutely,
Right.
it is really essentially like proxy war or proxy.
Right, but it won't-
God, what's the term? Whatever.
right. But I'm also like just kind of worried. Like Andrew, like you brought up some,
Attrition.
you brought up some nuance that like I had not considered. But I'm also just worried. You see a lot of like this North Korea belligerism, and in the past it would spike up for maybe about a week or two, and then like you wouldn't hear about it for years and years, and that I can only assume is just like, you know, maybe like they just received a reality check from the Chinese. But like, now that like this has been such a festering issue for several months now, I'm wondering if the Chinese are going to allow the United States to get into, and this is all speculation, this is not based on anything that I've read, it's just me speculating. I'm wondering if the Chinese are going to be more okay with the United States and their allies entering another Afghanistan-like conflict that will weaken the U.S.'s power abroad and leave even further, like Trump's election left a vacuum on the global stage, right? And like China wants to fill that vacuum, and you know, and they're competing with like other countries to fill that vacuum, but China wants that vacuum. I'm wondering if the Chinese are going to be slightly more okay, even like considering a refugee issue, with, you know, allowing the U.S. to like just lose even more of its global capital by entering a proxy war.
Well, I mean, they absolutely are, and I think we're seeing it's kind of been an inadvertent topic of this whole episode. It's the political motivation behind inaction or action. I think whenever you're seeing a president who has such a low approval rating is nearing impeachment like Trump is. I mean, I've read a lot of books where the main things they list out as ways to boost approval ratings is one, pass some sort of stimulus package or big thing that's popular for most Americans. Trump's done zilch. He hasn't done anything at all. Then second thing is go to war. You want to be a wartime king, a wartime president, and give off this American strength, American prosperity, and it's just I feel like that's kind of what we're nearing more towards. Is he sees his only option as being tough on China, tough on North Korea, tough on Russia, because a lot of conservatives and even some conservatively independents were tough on Obama, saying that his foreign policy skills were more diplomatic as opposed to hawkish, what they would prefer. So I think we're going to see a lot of it politically motivated behind him saying like, I'm the only person who can handle this threat, so don't dare impeach me, because Mike Pence is great, but he's only something when I'm here.
It's typical strongman tactics, and
Yeah,
honestly,
absolutely.
my theory with what's going on in North Korea right now and how they were able to progress their missile technology so fast is one, there is no way they're doing it by themselves. And
Well, I thought.
Real
this
quick,
time.
real
Oh,
quick.
sorry.
so I think there's either one stealing secrets from possibly, like I saw an article that they were trying to get into a nuclear plant or a missile plant in Ukraine. Like they were doing heavy espionage work. They were trying to get that. They were also but I also think that Russia is probably feeding them, and I think Iran's feeding them.
No, I imagine it's probably a proxy war with Russia. I mean, it's the same thing we're seeing as far as Syria goes. It's a now superpower and a once global superpower kind of vying for 21st century domination sort of thing. And I think if anyone was to be doing it, it's probably Russia more so than Iran, at least from what I've been reading. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're even getting it from smaller states, through a bunch of like trade proxies, I guess.
Yeah, I thought the whole thing was Pakistan. That's where I thought they were getting that stuff. I mean, maybe this was a long time ago. I know
doesn't
Pakistan.
really have anything to do with North Korea.
Well, no, I thought Pakistan had like jump started.
That we know of.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I had read somewhere. Like in conventional history that like Pakistan had helped North Korea jumpstart the nuclear program. So like if they're receiving a lot of help from the Pakistanis, which are a decent minor nuclear power, that can be something that's possible. I'm not sure that like I think maybe with Russia, but like, this is all like. By the way, guys, this is all speculation. We're basing it on news articles we read, past history, Chinese intentions, that kind of thing. All of this stuff is highly unpredictable.
We'll try not to become the liberal Alex Jones of Austin.
Yeah, no. Like, this is all speculation based on what we know. We're not,
we're not
don't
like,
be surprised.
child sex slaves on Mars. So.
Jesus.
He literally said that.
And if we quote anything or talk about any articles that you guys know aren't true and you want to send some stuff our way, we would love and appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just to educate ourselves so we can, talk more.
Yeah, and if we're wrong often enough, we'll start a weekly fact check segment. So reading the angry messages we get.
All right, so
on to one we can't mess up.
Yeah.
Sean Spicer.
Yeah, so have you guys heard recently Sean Spicer visited the Pope? How do you guys feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I mean, what the article literally said, exercise from Trump. So that's enough to say right there.
But the thing is, did he leave hell? Or is he still in it? That's the question.
I mean, nobody but the Pope can really bring him out of it, so.
I mean, Sean Spicer.
Repent of your Trump sins.
Sean Spicer was such an inadequate press secretary. He was so inadequate that, like, he got Americans into being interested in what the press secretary had to do with anything.
Remember that one time he hid in the bushes to get away from the press conference?
It's like we're living in a
classic
freaking cartoon.
It was a classic episode. Yeah.
The question is Sean Spicer Bugs Bunny or is he Daffy Duck? That's the question.
I see him kind of like an Elmer Fudd.
But
I'm hunting reporters.
he played a rabbit though. He was the White House.
Oh, okay, that's right. He played the White. God, this is like this is just another episode of Trump administration's zany antics.
I mean, he's not even in the Trump administration
Not anymore.
He's still in the news, and I think it's
Who
also
is in the Trump administration anymore, right?
Who's press secretary? Is it? Oh, sorry,
It's
Sarah
Sarah
Huckabee
Sanders.
Yeah. Well, we don't like her.
I mean, I haven't really seen much of her so far. At least she seems more professional than, Scaramouche.
The mooch.
Oh my god, that guy.
Oh my gosh.
Don't even, let's not get started on Scaramouche.
I wish
Did you guys see his interview with Stephen Colbert?
No.
I did
Oh
not.
my god. Alright, anyone who's listening to this podcast right now, go see that. It is one of the craziest...
Finish listening to the podcast.
Finish the podcast first. One of the craziest things I have ever seen. Him dishing dirt on Steve Bannon and Rice Priebus, like, on national TV is insane. Like, we're living in a tabloid nightmare, and it never gets old, and it never goes away. American politics is just devolving.
Yeah, well, we have elected a freaking reality show president. We got what we asked for.
Yeah. Well,
Celebrity of president.
celebrity president. Yeah.
Unprecedented.
So let's just go ahead and orbit around our last topic before our guest star.
So recently Kamala Harris came out and supported
Senator Harris,
saying that she was going to co-sponsor Bernie Sanders' single-payer Medicare for All healthcare bill.
Finally.
Thank God. I'm personally really, really happy to see her do this. I think it's a good political move. We don't know yet, honestly, if it's going to be a policy that, if she runs for president in 2020, which there's a lot of speculation about. I don't like to talk too much about 2020 yet, but I mean, if she does run and she supports,
maybe next week we'll talk about 2020.
she supports it. She supports it even as a candidate, and if she is elected, I mean, that would be fantastic. But I'm just happy to see her at least making a move right now, even if it is because she's been politically pressured or something like that. I mean, it's still a move in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, political pressure can often come out. It can often lead to some good things, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what happened with LBJ and civil rights. Like,
Nixon
he
and
was
the
not
EPA.
really
There's nothing wrong with political pressure. Oftentimes, it takes political pressure for you to decide, well, there's actually an appetite for this kind of thing. When maybe she was more skeptical that, like, maybe the Democratic Party or the Democratic base was, like, not ready for this kind of thing, but, like, she's, like, coming to pressure, then that's her saying,
which polling absolutely doesn't indicate,
No, definitely not.
Which is what makes me
70%. No, I don't think so.
Which is what makes me skeptical a little bit of the issue, because I mean, it's just at that point, it's either party establishment figures or party donors that are telling you, like, hold off,
Right. But hey, like, for what it is, I'd rather have her supporting it than not.
Yeah.
And this is such a good thing because Kamala Harris is, like, such a I mean, like with Democrats, like she's such a popular figure.
Well,
Like
she's
she's such a well-known.
I
she's
honestly don't. I don't see her as like a
She's pretty
popular. I see her as a
popular.
rising star more so than
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah,
who's
right.
current.
but like
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are the most popular figures.
if you're a Democrat,
Bernie Sanders is the
I'm
most
just saying,
popular
like if you're a
politician in
Democrat,
America right now. So
I'm
for
just
good
saying, I'm just saying, if you're a Democrat and you follow the news, you know who Kamala Harris is, and you probably have a positive opinion, a decently positive opinion of her. So like, this is the kind of thing that like we'll push her in the news, possibly get her, more of like the margins of Democratic support. Cynically, we can call it set up for a win in 2020, but optimistically, we can call it a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, along those lines, like we can probably discuss the timing of it. Like, we're probably not going to get this passed. We're in a Republican Congress.
Yeah.
But I think the very fact that we're getting it out there in a serious fashion, not like, being thrown out there by a Republican to troll us, essentially.
Yeah, I hated that so
I was
much.
mad at
Like,
that.
Yeah,
this is
You
something
don't-
that we need to be working towards.
Yeah.
You don't get the opportunity to pass legislation like this if you don't have a Democratic majority.
Right.
And you don't get that Democratic majority without pushing for
Exactly.
legislation like this. Priorities that the American people really
It's a
want.
very
Yeah.
strong statement
Yeah,
of
I
what
agree.
we actually want.
I agree with that. So, that sort of rounds out
The first
our-
segment of the podcast.
Yeah, so when we come back, we're going to have our very special guest, Doug Snyder.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Hello and welcome back to Trending Left. Today we have with us Doug Snyder, president of University Democrats.
Hi guys, thanks so much for having me.
So, Doug, what have you come to talk to us about?
Cool. So I came today to talk about the future of the Democratic Party following 2016. Not only to talk about, economic populism and the Hillary versus Bernie crap, but mostly to talk about the future of the party and where it needs to go in the future if it intends to win an election. So what I wanted to start out with talking about was, instead of wasting y'all's time with a post-mortem on 2016, like I think we've heard plenty of, just to sort of talk about what we've learned from it and what we clearly haven't. Following 2016, which was, of course, a
Tumultuous.
difficult election, we elected Tom Perez as chairman of the DNC. And like I said before, I'm not going to get into the petty squabble. I'm not going to do a Keith Ellison versus Tom Perez thing. Instead, I'm going to talk about what Tom Perez's one of his first actions was as DNC chairman, and that was to ask for the ask for the resignation letter of every single DNC employee. In an effort to rebuild the image of the DNC, he arbitrarily asked for everybody's resignation letter to hold it over their heads. And I know that's a fairly common practice in banking or corporate finance, but the DNC has it's right on the cliff and has the potential to become a strong party that represents the interests of the working class and a future of racial and economic justice, or it can work like a business, which was Trump's promise. And, we all see how that's working out. The Democrats also, in releasing their new platform, pretty much offered financial austerity and a supposed love and happiness with no path to get there and a pretty resigned, it's not possible regarding the things that people really want. And in addition, we haven't had a really concrete platform since maybe 2010, when the unpopularity of Obamacare made Democrats think we need to run away from Obamacare, as opposed to here's how Obamacare works, here's how it's helping people in concrete terms, as opposed to numbers, confusing facts, and then stepping away from it if need be. There's a reason Democrats are down to 15 governorships. 15 governorships.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it used to be 16, but then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old friend Jim Justice. We hate Jim Justice.
By the way, can we talk about how absurd of a name Jim Justice? That sounds like a guy who has lawyer commercials at 2 a.m. It's I'm Jim Justice, and I'm here to make sure that you're getting what you deserve when you get hit by a big old truck.
Virginia hammer.
We're not fans of Jim Justice.
Understood. But I know this is a dirty word, and I'm sorry for saying it because you're probably going to have to bleep it out, but we need to talk about populism.
I will bleep that out. No, I'm just kidding.
Holding for laugh. Okay, so we are sort of at a breaking point of the economy. Following 1975 to 1985, give or take, economic austerity in combination with deregulation, a gigantic cut towards the income tax for the upper percent, and all of these other factors all came together to create a system where almost all new wealth is being generated by a tiny, tiny percentage of people.
Yeah.
we are also at a point where racial tensions are quite high. That is, of course, due to the fact that many, many systems of institutionalized racism, sexism, and discrimination have continued to exist under the radar because we have yet to address anything beyond just the surface level. I mean, our private prison systems are absurd, and we're still electing people who are taking fun pictures with private prisons managers whenever they come visit Texas.
Yeah, and we were talking about Joe Arpaio earlier and how he
Oh,
was
Christ.
abusing prisoners.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one example for sure.
Yeah, he described his own prisons as a concentration camp.
Exactly.
Like, at what point? At what point? Anyway, he lost, but he's not going to jail because we live in a world where there is no justice.
Right.
And it-
Except for Jim Justice.
So, Trump offered a set of economic populist, since you guys can't see this, I'm doing hand quotations, policies that sought to address sort of the economic destitution that the working class has endured. Instead, working class people supported him and have already pulled away. Trump's main base remains the upper middle class, who see very clearly the benefits of Trump's economic policy. Economic populism, like it or not, has emerged. What we need to do to deal with it, however, is create an alternative that empowers the working class without, putting a gun to the neck of American trade, or, creating ruinous policies such as the proposed border tax with Mexico that would actually be very, very destructive towards America's working class.
Nothing like a good trade war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, if there's one thing America is good at,
And
War
war.
money guy.
Just war.
Just war.
We did talk war earlier in the pod, so.
in the pot. So
What?
basically, an alternative to the current system has emerged, and it is not only popular. I combined two words. It is not only popular, but it is also viable. We need to end capital's stranglehold on our country.
Yeah.
We can do this through a full rejection of this techno-libertarian new economy where we value a person who is able to manage a company at 397 times a person who is able to work the company. We need to re-empower unions and stop stepping away from them like the Democratic Party has become very famous for doing recently.
Yeah.
And we also need to ensure that, given the trends in the economy, that we don't leave a third of our nation jobless and without a new option. And we need to go farther than just retraining. It is entirely possible that within 3 to 5 decades, a third of the economy, give or take, could be seeing the end of their career.
Retail jobs.
Yes, be
automation
that front end
and stuff.
retail,
I mean,
be that front end retail jobs,
Quite
be it.
possibly sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just accommodating for the fact that something like a self-driving car would be terrifying to a government. Self-driving cars. Think about how many people work in delivery. Think about how many people work in transportation. And all of the people that have to go into the creation, even manufacturing jobs that remain. Some of the more high-tech manufacturing jobs are even on the edge of failing to exist anymore.
Yeah.
This new alternative needs to ensure that it re-empowers unions and creates an economy that works for people. It needs to empower a universal system of healthcare, be it Medicaid for all, be it pipe dream,
Minimum
reeling
wage
in
and
these
stuff.
companies, be it just a total universal British-style system where it is managed by the government or any of that. A viable alternative does, to an extent, exist, but it needs to be managed and it needs to be ensured that it will actually help people. So, to get to that point, we need to introduce a concept called class consciousness. This is something that's kind of an evil Marxist term. Like, you recoil from it. It's an uncomfortable word. It's a lot like entitlement. It's not an inherently bad term, but we look at it and we recoil. It makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about it. But class consciousness is something that the United States has for a very long time just been unwilling to talk about. We like to consider, with our whole rugged individualism, with the idea of free market capitalism, allowing any person to do anything if they want to, allowing any person to aspire to wealth. Like de Tocqueville said, wealth doesn't stay concentrated. Any American can become wealthy. We need to realize that that's just not true.
Yeah.
Right.
And class consciousness is, in less antiquated, stupid, old terms, is just becoming aware of that fact, of realizing that this isn't a country that values a black life and a white life equally. And the same amount of work that a person of color puts in and a white man puts in will not equal the same thing, will not equal the same result in almost any circumstance. And the same applies to a person who is in the working class who has to take care of their family. You know, how are you supposed to get your bachelor's degree and then go on to these career fields that are supposedly laid out there for everybody when you're having to take care of your family, when you're having to help out your sick mother, when you're having to help pay for someone else's livelihood? All of these systems have come together to create an economy where people can't just simply pull their bootstraps up. And class consciousness is the means through which we have to come to peace with that fact. Now, conversely, Democrats haven't presented themselves strategically with a firm ideology that seems to alleviate any of these problems.
Right.
I mean, we have, for the most part, said we're going to stop the attacks on the Voting Rights Act, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. We are going to re-empower Obamacare, which is fine. Obamacare was an amazing step forward. And
It's just the bare minimum of what progressives should
it
be
is the
doing.
bare minimum.
Yeah.
And recently, what we've responded to these claims of you need to do better with is it's just not possible. The wall isn't possible, and Trump won off of it.
Yeah.
I mean, say what you will, but putting an agenda forward that is meaningful to people, even if it's total crap like the wall is important. Think about how powerful the Democrats could come out if they presented policy that actually helps people, as opposed to the wall, which helps nobody, and that is provable. We know the wall is financially impossible, economically stupid, and will help next to nobody, except maybe the contractors that are going to put solar panels on it. Conversely, something like universal healthcare not only reduces costs for just about everybody, but it also allows us to reposition our healthcare system. We can start looking at determinants of health rather than just health, like what happens when people get sick.
Yeah, and on that note with the universal health care, I don't know if you heard, but Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders are working on a bill to, get universal health care going. So, what are your takes on that?
I just want to say that it's awesome. I think that, Kamala Harris always did support a universal system of healthcare, and she made that clear in her statements. But also, it is really important for a Democrat who is probably the current leader of the party, at least ideologically, to come out clearly with that sort of position and to empower it with a bill. And there are problems with the universal health care bill as it stands, but that doesn't matter. The fact is the bill is out there and people are seeing it. And so be it if it has to be worked on in committee. But the current ideological front person of the Democratic Party has come out in support of universal health care.
I think it's important to not forget that Representative John Conyers also had a single-payer health care bill in the House right now that has a pretty large amount of support, as far as like traditional, more moderate Democrats and progressives, So I think that's another sign that, the party in general is moving, because the House is more liberal than the Senate is as far as like the Democrats represented there, but still, just see both of them making a little bit of progress is powerful.
the hope is just that the leadership moves toward that. And I'm not sure if we see.
We're seeing that with Schumer, but
definitely
obviously,
Schumer. Pelosi can be a bit problematic.
Even
with
other leaders like Feinstein are more resistant to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've just been hearing a lot of stuff coming out of Feinstein's office. It's just not very. It's not good.
Which is what's so shocking, because Harris is the junior senator, and yet she is supporting this. And
just differences in governing style.
Yeah, I think that the Democratic Party's leadership is, in a sense, being left behind by these people realizing and genuinely coming to peace with the fact that you don't need to present something that would just be able to happen in a year. You don't have to just say, well, I don't know if that's possible, but here's something we can do in a year that I know will help people, which is fine. But people want more than just that. People want to know what you stand for beyond just, income tax credits.
Yeah.
Nobody wins an election on income tax credits.
Right.
Now, conversely, pulling back, I know that we've talked about some really strong Democrats who've taken some clear ideological standards. Conversely, the DNC gave us a better deal.
Yeah.
It gave us an uninspired platform, an uninspired slogan, and despite the fact that many of these thought leaders, be they, from the left, or be they strong, consistent Democrats, are pulling to the left, but we're just not getting that from the leadership. And I think that's something that is keeping people away from saying, all right, let's go on to 2018, let's win.
Along those lines, actually, it's really relevant that the Democratic Party is raising so little money because they're raising half of what the Republican Party was raising.
We were talking about this. I mean, I got a fundraising email like right before we were going to film the pod, from Nancy
Oh, yeah.
Pelosi, and it's just
It's uninspired and fear-mongering, and there's a reason why.
it's all resist Trump, Republicans.
Yeah, it's
resist
not just
Trump.
about
Stand
resist
up
Trump,
for
and that's one of the
something.
big mistakes we made. It was too much about resist Trump, but not enough about progress forward. And we need to start doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a balance to strike. I mean, people are scared about what Trump is doing. People are scared about what Republicans are doing, and it's important that they know that Democrats are going to stand in front of that. But at the same time, we're not putting forward I'm just repeating what everyone's saying, but we're not putting forward a message that says this is how we're doing better. And I don't think when the DNC released that stuff about a better deal and whatnot, I don't know just who was in the operating room there. Because it sure as heck doesn't sound like Elizabeth Warren was there.
I think a lot like what Doug was saying, though. It's
Yeah.
the people that have been given a seat at the table by people like Tom Perez,
Yeah.
people who are yes men, who are going to stay in line, who are going to do exactly what the donor base or the people who are really powering the party's, more centrist forward message are going to be along with. Because they don't want to go with what's popular. Because one, they probably don't see it as realistic or whatever, and maybe they do have a little bit of Washington insight that we don't have. But it's partly that, and it's partly also just resistance to change, right?
Yeah.
They feel like the winning strategy, and it's the Howard Dean, 50 straight strategy.
Dean Scream Dream Team.
The just move to the center and get all those Romney voting Republicans to pull over. It's just it's not the future because that's not where the coalition lies. The point of this podcast is it's called Trending Left because at least I believe that both parties are trending to the left on a lot of issues, and it's just the party establishments of both Republicans and Democrats aren't with that.
I think one clear example of this as a reality is that a Republican, a person on the right rather, can be so far to the right that they're wearing Nazi armbands and they'll still vote Republican. They will happily vote Republican. Conversely, someone who's just a little to the left of Bernie Sanders will see the Democratic Party as inviable and refuse to support it. And obviously a lot of the fault lies with them because I think forming a worthwhile coalition involves people from all ideologies coming together to come to a conclusion, but also this is the reality that we have to deal with as Democrats. This is the reality that we have to contend with, that the Republicans will always be able to pull their disgusting white supremacy voters to their side, while we conversely have to work together with a far less cohesive coalition.
Do you
Yeah,
think
it's a little
we're gonna
frustrating.
do you think we're going to see something? Because a lot of those far right people have been pulled in because of recent Tea Party movement, right? It kind of grew the party tent. Do you think we're going to see something similar now that groups like Our Revolution are such a huge part of the Democratic organizing base?
Indivisible.
I think that groups like Indivisible and Our Revolution are focusing more on just pulling. This is actually what I'm about to get into. They're focusing more on direct action. They're focusing more on pulling the party to where they are and extending the conversation and making their policies viable rather than pulling out from the party and threatening a primary. Certainly there have been threats to primary people like Joe Manchin, but we'll see how those turn out.
We'll see.
I can't really.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Me neither.
I don't love him, but I mean, you know how I feel.
He's Joe Manchin's son.
I'm not Joe Manchin's son.
He loves Joe Manchin.
So the biggest thing that we have to start doing as Democrats, I think, is realize that the poll and the perfectly crafted statement that will hurt or offend nobody and the perfect golden ideology will never exist. Policies that Democrats need to embrace will not always be inherently poll-wise popular.
Yeah.
I think a clear example of that is, and I talked about this with you guys earlier, but a clear example were the MLK organized protests in the South, particularly the Montgomery bus boycotts and the sit-ins of segregated restaurants. Anywhere from 20 to 25% of Americans approved of those protests. An uncomfortably small percentage, upwards of 60% explicitly disapproved. This wasn't a people didn't have a stance on it.
Yeah.
This was a people thought this was not a reasonable means to an end. They thought this was derivative. They thought this would hurt their cause. Opinion polls all around said MLK was hurting his cause. Associations with the Black Panthers and all of these criticisms thought that this movement wouldn't work. But it did work because it involved direct action rather than creating statements. rather
Stand
than
up
craft
for justice.
Yes, it involved actual, genuine justice rather than the creation of these perfectly envisioned statements to the press that have no substance, but make sure to call out each individual group, check, the little checkbox are all checked off, and then, God forbid you go on the news and then condemn Antifa.
Well,
but
I think that's why Sanders really needs to be praised for his campaign strategy of not being politically correct.
Yeah.
But not in the sense of saying Hispanics are the dirty ones, or they're the rapists or the murderers, but saying the rich have been kind of living off the fat of the land while everybody else has been, basically left with nothing for the last 70, 50 years.
Right.
And calling that out, because what these people want, the people who fund these candidates and the people who pour tons of dark money into our politics, they want no one to know that they're doing it. Because only when people get active or people get outraged does real change happen.
Yeah,
go ahead.
a
A general trend in American politics that goes back centuries really is that people tend to prioritize order over justice.
Yeah.
Disrupting their lives versus, this is right. And that's something that's really coming into focus now.
Yeah, I mean, just general political apathy as well, right? Why should I care? People that say, I don't follow politics, why should I care not to follow politics? I mean, that's just saying, so long as it doesn't disrupt your life, then no one has a right to do anything that's just substantial.
It's making an assumption that people live in a closed system, too. Everything we do impacts everyone else. And so when that apathy and that lack of action is an action in itself.
Silence is violence.
Yes.
True. I think, drawing from everything that you guys just said, one of the biggest problems with the DNC as it stands, is that it is obsessed with being on the moral high ground.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, here's what I mean. We had this nuclear option for years. We didn't use it because we thought that if we used it, well, that was it. They would use it too. This would be the end all be all. This would be the end of civilized politics. And then within 3 months of election, the Republicans use it, and it doesn't hurt them in the polls at all. We need to come to peace with the fact that playing nice doesn't work. This Aaron Sorkin created vision of a perfect system where everybody comes together, and in the end, not everybody's happy, but we get a good end product, isn't working, and it hasn't worked for a very long time. There is no civility, and these Republicans lose 0 poll points. They lose nothing. They lose no supporters. They don't lose any moderates or independents by just being terrible and doing terrible things, like Mitch McConnell holding the Supreme Court seat hostage, and then the second Neil Gorsuch gets in, it's fine, it's over, it's gone.
Yeah,
and it didn't hurt him one bit. The Democrats fundraised on it a little bit, but it did not hurt the Republicans even in the slightest. We have this idea that the system will prevail, that the system as it stands and civility, the system will prevail, and it only will prevail if we work with, if we don't have to work inside of it, we have to just work it. We need to be better. We need to stop pretending that we have the moral high ground, and people will just get over that and offer a sensible alternative. I mean, let's be honest. Trump is a literal rapist.
Yeah.
Trump is a rapist. Trump insults everybody. Mm-hmm. Trump is a racist, is disgusting, has done pretty much everything that in a more civilized time would have cost him a city council seat.
Would have ruined Obama. It would have ruined anyone who wasn't.
It would have ruined Obama because
populist.
of the standard to which we hold people of color.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
But
yes.
also, I mean, any of these things would have ruined. I mean, Hillary Clinton. They have been trying to pin something on her for 25 years, and they've gotten next to nothing. And that was still enough to make people think Hillary was this evil empress who was going to take over the United States and bend it to her will with her little gargoyle John Podesta sucking the blood of civilians. No, but I'm serious.
Yeah.
If the system worked, if this West Wing-esque vision of America worked, if things worked, Trump couldn't have won. And that needs to be the point from which we start. We are still trying to fundraise off of the Republicans are ignoring the way the system works. The Republicans aren't working with us. The Republicans, okay, that's it. We tried to work with them, and they filed like 90 amendments to Obamacare. They took the wind out of Obamacare. They removed drug price negotiation, which was one of the main tenets of how it was going to be funded. And then they got to claim that Obamacare wasn't funded. All of these things have come together because we just still believe in this nonsensical, idealized system. And now, to alleviate these concerns, to create a new party, we need to engage in direct action. I think one really interesting example of this, and I'm sorry for praising this organization, but I think this is a really, really interesting example. In Louisiana, about 2 weeks ago, while the Confederate statues were coming down, and all of the various, and obviously I support the coming down of the Confederate statues, let me make that very clear. But while all of these local Democratic parties and the Louisiana Democratic parties were making very strongly worded statements about how these statues were going to make a meaningful difference, conversely, the New Orleans Democratic Socialists of America banded together and fixed people's brake lights for free all week. They fixed people's brake lights because African Americans disproportionately are pulled over for broken brake lights, and those are when a lot of these incidences of violence occur. They engaged in clear, statementless direct action that helped people unequivocally and identified a clear problem in the system. What are we doing? Where is our direct action? What was the last genuine day of action that we can think of the DNC engaging in?
Good question.
I genuinely cannot think
can't
of one. The DNC is anywhere from the first to the second most powerful political union in the United States. It has millions of supporters, millions of activists, and millions of dollars. And there's so much more that we could be doing. And I mean, these tiny, tiny groups of ideologues scattered throughout the nation are engaging in direct action that's helping, more people than sometimes we even help. I don't know. But we need to look towards a policy of the future.
Yes.
In one line, that's stop saying it's not viable and tell us how you're going to make it viable. Universal health care is now polling at 60 to 70% positive. People care about economic justice. And even if old white guys are unwilling to help us out on racial and gender justice, we're going to have to make them. Because like what happened in the 60s, we need to hold this country hostage. We need to hold our elected officials accountable until they provide for us the justice that we need and we deserve. Because institutionalized racism, sexism, and discrimination on religion and every other factor have become so firmly entrenched that it's going to take decades to even get a little bit of it rooted out.
Oh, yeah.
But we need to have started yesterday. We need to have started with a reformed criminal justice system, with an immediate end of the private prison system, which, to his credit, Obama tried to do, but we haven't really talked about it since then, have we?
Drugs.
No.
Yeah. Why haven't we been talking about Obama made an incredible step forward on private prisons, and we haven't heard about it since. That was an immensely popular decision. That pulled independents, that pulled far left people, that pulled people in and made them realize the Democratic Party did have justice in mind. Why haven't we heard about it?
Yeah.
Where has that been? I think that we need to call into question American foreign policy. We need to call into question the subjugation of the working class. We need to make racial justice our praxis. We need to look at how wealth creation is in its current form and end this pipeline of money to the very, very top 1%. And all of these policies, I know this isn't the most important factor, but all of these policies are popular. And the Republicans won by promising a bunch of crap. They won by promising the wall. They won by promising stupid trade wars that people don't even really like. Trump won 24% of the country, give or take, with his nonsensical policies. Think about how powerful the Democrats could be if we presented a viable alternative that didn't necessarily make the wealthy happy.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a point when we say bringing up policies and things that will benefit the American people, regardless of popularity. Bernie Sanders did this thing, and I don't want to say he issued political correctness, because political correctness is just an excuse. Being politically incorrect is just an excuse to be racist. I'm just talking about pure honesty. Right? Bernie Sanders was honest, and I couldn't vote in the primary, but I would have voted for him. I was a diehard Bernie supporter. He made legitimate promises. He had plans that maybe needed more scrutiny, but he had plans, he had ideas, and he had goals for the country that involved alleviating the cost of college, alleviating the cost of healthcare, alleviating all sorts of burdens on the American people. And everywhere you look, you may see people say, oh, well, he just wants to give you free stuff or whatnot. But we got people paying attention. We got people paying attention to his policies and to his ideas, and we got people disagreeing, but most importantly, we got a lot of people agreeing and signing up and saying, this is the Democratic Party I want, this is the Democratic nominee that I want. Okay, that's why Bernie Sanders captivated so many young people, because they believed in his honesty, they believed in his ability to say, I want to actually help you regardless of the popularity of these policies. I don't know how well free college polls, but I mean, if it's anything, in certain areas of the country, they're going to say, well, he's just giving you free things without working hard for it. I'm using air quotes for it. But things like universal health care poll very well. Even things like moderate steps forward, like a public option, poll exceptionally well. So, I mean, it's just about like Doug says, kind of just eschewing the polls and saying, what can we do to help people that is more than just these lukewarm messages on things everybody agrees. Just to touch more on the financial stuff, like Democrats, they came out with this anti-monopoly stuff. I'm all for that, but let's not ridiculous. It's impactful, but people already, the vast majority of the country, they don't like monopolies. Great, that's the Democratic Party coming out and saying, well, we're against bee stings.
Here's a modern example. Pulling down Confederate statues is unpopular.
Yeah.
40%, maybe less, give or take, of the nation actually supports pulling them down, and a higher percentage supports leaving them up. But we engaged in some rather direct protests, and they were coming down all across the nation.
Yep.
Now let me say this. I don't give a crap about Bernie Sanders. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I don't give a crap about him anymore. This is not a Bernie problem. This is not a Hillary problem. This is not even an Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Deval Patrick. This is not anybody's problem. This is a problem of a party that needs to take this country back. We have 15 governorships. I cannot stress that enough. We have local news being controlled by conservative talking heads. We have local governments and city governments and state governments being controlled by conservative talking heads, Tea Party acolytes, and financial stakeholders who just want to see things stay the way that they are. I mean, the future of this party is going to need to be people who are willing to speak up and say this isn't working for us. We need to shut up about meaningless statements. We need to be hard on candidates, and we need to, frankly, and this is where I disagree with a lot of people who have similar ideology to me, we need to participate in the DNC.
Yeah.
We need to be
Yeah,
active.
we
We need to be active in primaries, first of all, but we still do need to be active in general elections.
Absolutely.
Regardless of where you stood ideologically, a vote for Hillary was far more impactful than not voting. Because, you can say what you will about her foreign policy, you can say what you will about how to the left she was. It doesn't matter. She would have been better. She would have been a lot better. And she would have been probably pretty good at it, too.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that this isn't about anybody. It's certainly not about Bernie Sanders anymore. I mean, it looks like he's going out there and stumping, but I really do hope he's stumping for someone like Kamala Harris or like somebody else, who knows, who's able to come stand as the standard bearer of the party and present a viable alternative. We are, as it stands, a nation in decline. We do not have this national respect. Our wars of imperialism have been called under question by the entirety of the world now. It's not just a couple of fringe nations and politics. We no longer have Tony Blair backing us up. We have the same movement happening in Britain, and guess what? Everybody and their mom said Jeremy Corbyn was going to embarrass the party, and for sure none of his policies were all that viable, but holy crap.
Yeah.
He closed a 25-point lead in 2 months. Mm-hmm. Why have we not at least talked about that? This level of populism, okay, whatever, may not be the smartest alternative, but at the very least, we need to present a viable alternative for the future that isn't beholden to the wealthy elite. And certainly we saw that in 2015 with Senator Sanders, but we had seen this previously with candidates like Dennis Kucinich, and at the beginning Barack Obama, and previously going all the way back. Think about Lyndon Johnson, this hard-handed Democrat from Texas, a state that was on the border of John Connollying all the way to the Republican Party. And Lyndon Johnson created, I mean, even more so than FDR maybe, one of the most strong-armed, progressive, anti-elite platforms this country has ever seen.
War on
I mean,
poverty.
yes. Can we talk about the war on poverty? The Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act was a kick in the genitals to racists. It punched them in the face and said, "Suck it." This is not like not all of these policies were even popular. He was meeting at the White House with MLK. Everybody hated MLK. I mean, we all pretend to love him now because, you know, we built big statues of him and he ended up winning, God forbid. But, like, he wasn't popular. We were able to leverage this economic populism. We were able to leverage it and turn it into Medicare and Medicaid, two of the most progressive and impactful policies this nation has ever seen. We were able to take these ideas, these floating ideas, this sense of purpose, this, like, John Steinbeck-style desire to just go somewhere, and turn it into an incredibly popular platform that has transformed this United States, be it the Primary and Secondary Education Act, be it the Voting Rights Act, be it the Civil Rights Act, be it the healthcare policy, be it any of these platforms, be it, you know, public TV, be it any of these policies. We leveraged this vitriol, we leveraged this uncomfortability, this sense of purpose, and turned it into an amazing platform. We have to do that again. And honestly, that's about all I have. I just want to conclude with Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are proving that it's not a lost cause. Not only are these two incredibly eloquent progressive Democrats out there stumping for us, they're also listening to us. People told Cory Booker, "Hey man, we really want you to support this bill that allows negotiation of drug prices from Canada." And he did. Kamala Harris already supported universal health care, let me make that clear. But people said, "Sign on to this bill. We want to see your name on it because it's important to us." And she did. And I don't think that's about Bernie Sanders. I think that's about Kamala Harris. I think that's about Cory Booker. I think this is about a new generation of leaders who are taking power in the Democratic Party, who have the potential to fulfill these goals, but we need to push them. We need to show up, we need to vote, and we need to be vocal. Because I think that the Democratic Party, if it follows their lead, could genuinely present a viable alternative for the future. And that's all I have for y'all.
All right. Final thoughts? Anyone?
So you want to go?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Doug. You know, it's not the politicians who run the country. It's the people. You know, we elect them. They serve us. We don't serve them.
Yep.
So we need to make our voices heard if we want to make a better country. And yeah, you know, I'm very passionate about voting for this reason because, you know, there's nothing simpler to make your voice heard than voting. That's saying
You're here.
So that's saying this is who I want. This is the future I want for our country. So yeah, that's my final thoughts.
I really love how you mentioned LBJ there because I think it's. I've talked a lot with Marco, especially about my theory of how every 30 years the U.S. and its economy and racial divides and things like that they all come to a crash, and it's just this awful cyclical thing that is because, you know, like you're saying, the wealthy, Republicans, most of them, and like centrist Democrats just allow the economy to be deregulated, allow wealth gaps to increase, allow racial divides to get worse. And it's like every 30 years the Democratic Party gets up and does this big progressive push and something happens and we revere it for the next 30 years, but we do absolutely nothing in between to build that coalition, hold it together. And it's like we talk so much about how we love Teddy Roosevelt in the 1910s, we love FDR in the 1940s, we love LBJ in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah, right, but
we don't have that
anything
person
with
today.
them,
And even if we did, the party as it currently is not brave enough, does not have the conviction enough to stand behind that person. And it's like you're saying, about pushing them forward.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think a good example of economic policy that we could look towards the future is Senator Elizabeth Warren, who has made a significant part of her rise to popularity, sticking it to these big banks. Sticking it,
21st century Glass-Steagall.
Re-empowering the Glass-Steagall Act. But
bring it back.
Most of all, and this is something that may be unpopular, and I'm sorry if it draws a little ire, but Democrats may need to come to peace with the fact that not all of their policies are going to be good for the economy. And what I mean by that is when the stock market, when the stock market looks good, when it looks like the Dow Jones and all of these various stocks are going up, that's mostly helping the upper middle class.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like a working class person isn't going to have a strong 401k. They're not going to have, a Vanguard fund waiting for them when they get older. They're not going to have options. They're not going to have stocks to pass on to their kids. We need to look towards an economic policy that isn't merely just growing the economy, but actually making sure that new wealth is going to those whom it needs to go to. Because, I mean, CEOs used to make about 40, give or take, 40 times what their least paid employee makes. Now it's about 400 times. And those CEOs, when they are given the tax cuts that a lot of Democrats support, these corporate tax cuts, all of that money, almost every single cent, is saved or is put back in stock buybacks. A lot of it goes into buying back stock, which only benefits the wealthy. And a lot of it goes into growing the company or offering bonuses to executives, or if we offer if we offer tax cuts to the very, very wealthy, all of that money goes overseas or into the stock market. And neither of those places actually help the working class and most of the middle class. So, in agreeing with you, in creating a better economic policy for the future, Democrats may need to come to peace with the fact that policy isn't going to just be 4% economic growth.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I believe in, like, we've all heard of trickle-down economics. I believe in the exact opposite, trickle-up economics. Whenever the lower classes are able to buy cheaply produced goods in as much, quantity as they possibly can, that's what America's built on, the manufacturing and that sort of opportunity. And that money goes up. The most prominent example of this historically is Henry Ford giving his workers a wage through which they could actually buy one of his cars, and, giving out cars that the lower classes could actually, afford. And that resulted in prosperity for everybody. Don't get me wrong, Henry Ford had a lot of problems. He was kind of a terrible person. But in terms of his economic policy, it was fantastic. And I'll just end on that. Trickle-up economics is the way forward.
All right, so I think that concludes your conversation for today. Doug, thank you for coming on. I think it was very informative for all of us.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk at you for 40 minutes.
No, no, please.
Nonsense.
No. It was very informative. I know our listeners will probably get a kick out of it.
Yeah. I'm sure both of them will love hearing my thoughts.
We have 100 likes, so don't worry.
130.
130. All right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We are planning to have a conservative on next week as our guest, so make sure to look out on our Facebook and stuff for when we announce who that person is. And yeah, we hope to see you guys next week.
All right.